Welcome to the Good Old Blades podcast. I am your host, Aaron Levere, and join me as we talk to other knife makers and craftsmen about anything and everything knives. Stephen King once said, "Life isn't a support system for art. It's the other way around." And for Alicia Newton, coordinator and director of Bladeshow for the past 15 years, supporting artists is her life. When it comes to the largest knife show on earth, Alicia has managed to somehow wrangle thousands of exhibitors, table contracts, special events at each show, venues, hotels, and a vast marketing effort, and done so with grace that seems perfectly natural. Alicia, along with a tight-knit group of supporters of her vision, spends countless hours orchestrating what many consider to be the Super Bowl of knife shows. She's given me the chance to talk to her about her passion, educate us on knife shows, and represent an organization that brings so much to the knife community. Alicia, it's an extreme pleasure to have you on the Good Old Blades podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited. I always, enjoy talking to people, and especially the Bladeshow.
Yeah. Well, on the show, I think I talk a lot to makers about their perspective on things, and that's not always the most helpful to makers. Like the perspective from maker to maker is like sometimes like the blind leading the blind. And as we talk about like the dynamics of online selling or going to shows, or how a maker navigates through the industry of knives, I thought it would be the greatest benefit to my listeners to talk to somebody who runs the largest knife show on earth, right? And to talk through some of the the caveats and how to navigate that space. So it's a pleasure to be able to talk to a subject matter expert on shows, because I think we could all learn a lot from you.
Well, I hope I can give some pearls of wisdom.
So, firstly, I would love to kind of get an idea of what got you from where you're at to running or being the director of Bladeshow and events there. If you can give me a little bit of a backstory, like where you came from and what got you to the Bladeshow position that you're in, I would love it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all somewhat random, if you will. I came from a background in working in another event arena, actually in the ski and snowboard industry, which is also very community driven, and a job that also kind of just really allowed me to be around like-minded people, outdoors, all those types of things. And I always wondered, if I ever had to leave that job, would I be able to find that? So skip forward several years. I left where I was living in Washington, D.C. I moved back closer to my family, ended up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and ended up at a company originally hired to do marketing. So my background for about 20 plus years was PR and marketing. And the day, I'm sorry, let's say about 2 weeks before I was supposed to start my job, they called me and said, "Hey, actually, our event person just left. Would you be willing to take that job? That's an immediate need we had." And at the time, I had not actually run events. I had worked on, ironically, the largest ski and snowboard show, but I was not in the operations. And so I talked to a couple people and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Why not? So I started out in the company as an event manager, working more on our conference side of the businesses. And then we had some new leadership come in, and they decided that we would divide the events business up to conferences, which are usually like where you go into the hotels and there's all kinds of um, education sessions and things like that. And most importantly, you have to dress up in really nice clothes, and I hated that. So I immediately said, I want the trade shows. I will take the trade shows. That's where I have experience. And they handed me some of our trade shows. And then eventually in 2009, they handed me the Blade Show. It was being run by a team out of our Wisconsin office at the time. And so 2009 was kind of my first co-leading show, if you will, with the team that was running it. And then 2010, it transitioned to me fully operational. And I have been running the Blade Show. And at the time, when we were still at the other company before we got purchased, at my heyday, we were running 22 events for that company. And I had a massive team. So, and then, as most people know, we were purchased in 2018 and Blade Magazine and Blade Show. And then we've grown, obviously, the Blade Show itself to now three shows. And so those three shows pretty much keep me busy year round.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, so serendipitous to be running like kind of what you've done for a long time to doing this really crazy kind of like off the wall like event planning like for the largest thing in the world, right? I mean,
Right.
um, what is the size of your team for organizing look like today?
Well, if I tell you that, I'm going to have to give away one of my biggest secrets. So, that having been said, I actually don't have a team. So I do work for our parent company, Caribou, and there are a lot of people within my organization that I rely on that I work in collaboration with in terms of obviously Steve Shackleford with Blade Magazine, team people in our e-commerce business, people that help with kind of the website for Blade Show, etc. Um, but in terms of like coordinators, you know, other people that would I used to have at my old company, um, I don't have those people. So so it is me. And I'd like to try to keep that as a little known secret, but it is me. But again, I don't want to take away from any other the people in my company that work on our other brands or do have other we do have a web developer and we do have graphic artists and we do have advertising people. And I do work hand in hand with all those people. So I don't want to say it's just me literally dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and I have zero help. That is not the case. But in terms of the day-to-day operations, it is just me.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of a leading question to a certain extent because I know that when most people that because I talk to a large breadth of people inside of the knife industry, they always mention your name, right? And so I'm thinking, well, if I'm always talking to Alicia, then Alicia's probably the one that most people are going to be talking to. And I've heard from several knife makers, it's like be kind to Alicia because she's like running a lot of this stuff. Like I don't think it's like be kind because otherwise you'll pay.
Yeah.
It's be kind because you have a lot on your shoulders. And I think that's an important point though, because as people are interacting with the organization, they have to understand that behind that organization there is a person that's doing all the work to try to get everybody happy, and that person is you. And it's like it is be kind to you, right? It is be kind and be understanding because you are juggling so many people and so many different facets of how the show gets performed that if we don't work as partners, like we're knife makers, but if we don't work as partners with the show, then we're not helping you out. And I think that almost without without reservation, everybody loves you. I mean, everybody I've ever talked to always talks about how great of a job you do and how caring you are and how supportive you are. So I think that that's important for everybody to know, especially as they start introducing themselves to knife shows, that they realize that you are the person behind the scenes trying to make everything work.
No, and I really appreciate that. And I think you're right. I mean, my thinking is be kind to people always, no matter what. But I think you're right. I don't think it's people saying to you, be kind, because she can control what your fate at the show or anything like that. It's just, hey, be a little empathetic because, you are not her only exhibitor. There are thousands of exhibitors. But I can honestly say, and I mean this with zero blowing smoke up anyone, this community by and far is amazing. I feel incredibly blessed beyond words to have the job that I do. I mean, I think I told you I've got 22 shows under my belt. I can assure you, I would not stick around because it is a lot. And you do get beat up a lot of times, very much not by the exhibitors, believe it or not, but more from the attendees that don't associate there being a personal face behind all this and don't necessarily kind of understand the work. To them, they're just going to an event and they're thinking there's probably, 25 people in customer service and they're having a bad day and they can't find their ticket or whatever and they just want to beat up on somebody. And so those people, that kind of comes with the territory and I can brush that off. But for the most part, the exhibitors, I can really honestly truly say that all of you guys are kind, you're appreciative. um, I'm always blown away with the amount of people that take the time to just come up at the end of the show and say thanks. And just that simple word, that's a lot, and I think it's twofold. They recognize everything that I'm doing, but I recognize everything that you guys are doing to be there. You guys, you're producing, you're creating products that you love. You're pouring your heart and soul and passion to something that you love, and you're, doing just as much to get ready to come to the show, but just in a different capacity than what I'm doing to get it ready for you guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I speak personally that I appreciate it because um, my introduction to Blade Show was through the context of how I understood that the Knife Makers Guild ran shows back in the day, right? And
Hmm.
as that transitions over to Blade Show running the show, um, I I was really not prepared at all. I had done one local show in Texas to prepare myself for running a table and what I needed to prepare and everything, but I had zero context. So I basically have to jump into how to exhibit at the largest show. I mean, it wasn't Blade Show Texas. It was Atlanta. It was like the real deal show,
The
right?
Super Bowl of the
Yeah,
shows.
yeah, yeah. And I went from like one small at the time, not it was not really the best show because they were switching venues and whatnot. And so I didn't sell any knives. There wasn't a lot of foot traffic and whatnot, to going to Atlanta and just like drinking from a fire hose, trying to figure out how to do everything. And at, like, so yes, from a contract perspective and getting all those things around, between communicating with you on the contract and getting everything paid up, and going and getting in badges and everything, like the staff that you have to facilitate all that, it was really easy in comparison to trying to navigate how to set up a table and to deal with the foot traffic. Like, what is that all going to look like? And I don't know if you remember this, but so the show that I had first attended was in Atlanta, and it was right after. COVID, right? We were kind of like
Okay.
what I think it was 2021, right? It was like a what,
Right.
who all's going to be there, and so the rest of the world was largely locked down. I don't think there was any European knife makers there, or at least very few. So
No, there was hardly any international.
yeah, there was
None.
no one from Australia. I don't think that opened up till 2022, right? And so I was placed temporarily in another uh, designated or reserved table that was right behind Steve Johnson, or right forward of
Hmm.
him. Yeah, and so that experience to me was a lot different than what I had heard, because a lot of knife makers said, the first time that you join a show, you're likely not going to get a good table, because I say not good table. I mean, it's not preferred table, because you don't have the opportunity to just pick kind of where you want to sit. And
Right.
because of that, they were like, you will have first availability, and that's not really a thing. Like, everybody wants to be there, and if they have the ability to upgrade or move tables as they are there for many years, they try to navigate that system. And so I kind of got like I struck the lottery, because it just so happens that in this the post-pandemic show circle, I was placed in a table that was prime. Really, I mean, by one of the greatest living knife makers, according to Steve Shackleford, right? I mean, Steve Johnson. We were back to back. I got to meet his family and everything, and I was in a really great area. But kind of to the point is that the traffic alone from where I was sitting in proximity to the front doors, and I was in the big room and everything, to me was very overwhelming. There was just a lot, and I don't think that I could have prepared for it. So, like, you guys made that simple, because you took a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the navigating how to sign up for the show off the table. Like, I didn't have to worry about it. I really only had to focus on, like, what is it that I have to do as a knife maker exhibiting to try to capitalize on this thing that I've invested in. And to me, that shows a lot of initiative on y'all's side to figure out and orchestrate how to make it the easiest for the knife maker.
Well, and I think there was kind of so many things that you were saying there, and so many things that I was thinking in my head about commenting. And one thing that you kind of mentioned that is a statement like you're not going to get a good table your first year, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not always necessarily the case. And you're right. You did 2021, even though the show happened, I feel like that's still a year with an asterisk because we weren't even close to our normal capacity. To your point, we were missing over 125 international exhibitors easily. But I've found over the years that, you know, usually how I do my process, because then if I'm ever challenged on anything, my process is very simple and it's very fair in terms of new exhibitors. New exhibitors are placed in the tables that have been left available by guys that didn't renew their space and or have moved. Then we take all the open inventory and I just kind of go down through the list based on when did you turn your contract in? And so Aaron turned his contract in on June 12th. Joe turned his contract in on July 5th. Aaron will get the first table that's available, and then I go through there. Um, and then to that avail kind of the move list too. I think people sometimes question that. And the move list is basically, to your point, it's kind of done on years attending. Again, it's you got to pay your dues a little bit. You don't get to walk in and be on the front row when, somebody else who's been coming to the Blade Show for 15 years. Um, So those to me have just been fair policies and easy to um, kind of justify when a decision is made. But further to your point about shows, you're exactly right. And I think that there's an education here. And I've actually thought about creating some pieces for new exhibitors because it is very overwhelming to come to a blade show. but people have to understand that you can either look at shows from a standpoint of it's only a successful show if I sold my knives. And that's your only metric for a successful knife show, then you probably on your first year are not going to have a successful show. However, if you can look at the knife show and your metrics are, yes, maybe I still sold two knives. Okay, great. I networked and I met other new makers. I met new material suppliers. I talked with, 150 people. A lot of people that come to a blade show, they already have in their mind who they want to buy from. They're either buying factory, they're buying custom, but they, for the most part, already know I'm going to buy from this maker, and this maker. So they're in their mind, their money's been spent. However, they stop by Aaron's table. Aaron engages them. He's like, man, I really like your stuff. 3 months down the line, when he's ready to purchase again, he remembers meeting Aaron and he reaches out and he buys a knife from him or he commissions a custom build, whatever the case may be. So if we can educate people to think about shows as more than just your only metric being I sold knives or I didn't sell knives, but using it more for becoming a part of the community, building your community, networking, exposing yourself to new customers because not everybody's on social media. I hate to share that with everybody. That is how you have to look at shows and then be consistent with coming to shows so that more and more people become aware of who you are, what you're about, your product, etc. And that's probably the biggest thing I try to educate people on.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that because that's like similar to my experience. So I come from a long history in technology. So IT and cybersecurity, and I've done some web development and worked with some very large companies in e-commerce and things like that, right? And one of the things that I've noticed is that as much as knives are like a standard business, they're also just as equally not like standard businesses. And the
Hmm.
reason kind of is because every custom knife maker and every company kind of operates on their own island, and um, they have their own customers, they have their own appeal. They're not just custom knife makers, they're semi production, they're production, they're suppliers of things, they're leather workers, right? And so as you talk about the show, it's like I could be sitting next to a knife maker that is a custom knife maker or a legend like Steve Johnson, but then I could also be sitting next to somebody who is a mid tech, production knife manufacturer. Although I would say that some of those companies and some of those people navigate more towards booths and things. There is the opportunity, at least in the show circuit, to be around other companies that sit in another portion of the industry that's still within knives. So we're always like a niche within a niche, it seems. But kind of to your point, a lot of the feedback that I've gotten on shows has been from other knife makers. And the rumor mill or gossip circle or whatever it is in knife making is kind of like the same kind as being in a nursing home. It's a very like it's very faction based. It is very heavily opinion based, and you can never
Hmm.
really tell talking with another knife maker whether it's perceived reality or reality. So it's good to talk through things like, again, like with you, because your job obviously is to try to prop us up, because if we're successful and we find value in the show, then we invest in the show that you're putting on, right? But kind of to that point, with new knife makers, I it's new knife makers and existing knife makers that I think if more of that was more of like the guidance on how to maximize the experience of a show was dictated by the venue, or at least if there was like helpful articles or tips or these are the ways that you should do things to get the most out of it. I think that that would be far more helpful than people trying to get anecdotal evidence from other knife makers, because for me, like there were a lot of things that I was not prepared for my first blade show, but there were other things that I felt like I was over prepared for, and it wasn't a thing within the show that I had to worry about at all. And to me, that gets really confusing, especially I think within your first 5 years of doing shows is probably some of the most complex, because you were really trying to figure out how your business functions in the context of a show where you're competing against a lot of people, and that is super focused in a venue with like 1,000 plus of you,
Hmm.
like in some way, shape, or form. And it's like how do you figure that out and navigate that?
Well, I mean, do you mean as how do you as an exhibitor navigate basically being in a room full of your competition, or is I just want to make sure I answer you kind of correctly.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, I'll contextualize this. I fully believe that in the market of knives, the maker or manufacturer, whoever it is, does not really have competition.
Hmm.
That your competition is you, because you as a maker are bringing like yourself to the table, right? So like there could be two knife makers that make let's just say a loveless drop point hunter, and they sit next to each other, and one being Steve Johnson will get a lot of people coming to him, and then the person that sits right behind them, a la me, would sell maybe no to some knives or get some foot traffic. And like that is a concept of one knife maker being a legendary knife maker and building up his business, and me being a an upstart business and a maker. So I'm not going to compete with Steve Johnson. I'm not really going to compete with the person that's right next to me. I But what I'm talking about is how to be successful in a sea of other people that all compete for the dollar that sits in a customer's pocket, right?
Right. Okay.
How to navigate through that, because it is some about what do you put on your table, how does your display work, how do you communicate with customers, like what are some of those etiquette components, setup components, things like that. So I'm not really interested in as much as a knife maker personally in trying to compete with the table next to me, except as it relates to the customer coming up and looking at my work and validating that it's a maybe a good investment or purchase or something like that for them. So like how do I do that in the context of a show where there's just like 1,000 people that do like think the same way?
Sure. No. Okay. That makes sense. And that's a multifaceted answer to me. First of all, believe it or not, let's start very simple. And I see it time and time and time again at a blade show. The person that is choosing to just sit down at their table and be on their phone, just talking with the person, whoever came with them, not engaging, just smiling at the people as they walk by. That is like basic 101. Don't do if you want to fail at the blade show. Because to your point, you are in a room with a sea of people and you are all competing for dollars, like you said, customer dollars, because you're right, every knife is different. So if you really want to make an impact, stand up, say hello, talk to people. whether, it's like the annoying salesperson, in the small boutique that you go to shop. And yes, most times you're like, I don't need you to help me find a shirt. I just want to, walk around. To some degree, you're going to get that a little bit, but you never know when you have a chance to engage a customer. And I go back to, you may not have made the sell right then, but they will remember you. They'll remember that you took the time, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and then, there's some other principles too that we encourage people to follow. Some of it again are just mind tricks. If you brought 20 knives, you don't necessarily want to put all 20 up on the table at one time because again, these are mind tricks. To somebody that might be like, oh wow, he doesn't actually, he's sold at 20. No, he's not selling any knives. He may not be a good knife maker. And that's probably going to be a more standard response from somebody that's what we would call a looker that's coming in on a Saturday and was like, hey, there's a knife show in town, let's go check it out. And is not enthusiast. So you have to look at shows as being strategic as well, putting your best foot forward. But then the third thing I think really genuinely helps is you have to do a lot of work beforehand. And whether that be you are building up customers through your websites, through your social media, through your Patreon, through YouTube, any of that stuff, kind of like we were talking about me, for a lot of people, I'm a name that is synonymous with Bladeshow, but they don't necessarily know the face behind the name. You as knife makers, you may have a lot of customers that you engage with on social media or through your email distribution list. And the show is that opportunity that presents itself now for you to be face to face with that customer and really brings that personal touch now. So it's not just show up, throw your knives down on the table, and hope they sell. Besides just making the knives, you have to do a little advanced work, just like I have to do all this advanced work to make sure that I create the best show experience, not only for you as exhibitors, making it seamless, making sure the venue's ready, making sure you guys have everything you have to succeed, but also for all the customers coming in the door. We want that to be an awesome experience. But then once they're in the door, it's up to the exhibitors to, kind of polish that experience for them. And it requires a little bit more than just making your knives and showing up and putting them down on the table.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you have any particular advice on like displays or things? Because I really see the gambit. Anything from a very vanilla table setup to large displays and things like that. Do you see anything that you think is like the sweet spot for it? Like, is it more beneficial to have like a table tent or like flag or something on your table display for branding, or are there things like that you see that consistently drive better traffic to your table?
I feel like that to some degree is also a loaded question because, obviously we all know at Blade Show Atlanta, well, and actually all the Blade shows, we have people that spend the night days in advance and they're running to certain makers. And I never like to kind of speculate or say which makers those are. But in those particular cases that those guys are spending the night for, I'm sure they can run to that person's table and it wouldn't matter if they had a table skirt and nothing on it because that person has done their job prior to the show of creating all the buzz, letting the people in their group, their email list, whatever, know what's going to be at the show, and those people are running to that table. So it doesn't matter how they've displayed the knives, if that makes sense. So now you have to kind of come into the people that don't necessarily have that base yet, that are maybe new. So yeah, you're competing for eyes. So yeah, I think in that case, cool branding, be it you have a banner that goes across the front of your table. A lot of guys create custom table covers, custom table banners. We do see guys that build banners that are on PVC pipe kind of above their table. Um, I mean, can I say that that means that they're going to get more people stop by their table? That's really a tough, because at the end of the day, I always go back to it doesn't matter where your location is on the show floor. If you have a product that somebody wants, they will come find you no matter where you are on that show floor. And I say that tried and true because I had an exhibitor one year, every year, he had me move him because he kept saying he wasn't getting any sales, wasn't getting the foot traffic. So I'd move him again, and I moved him again, and I moved him again. And the only thing I could finally felt like I wanted to say to him, but I would never say is, I hate to tell you this, but you basically just don't have a product that somebody wants. But I can't say that. But that's what I was thinking in my mind because we moved him to every possible area on that show floor. So it really does have to do with, again, your advanced preparation. What are you doing to let people know you're going to be there in advance of the show? But then, yeah, I think if you're a new person, you do want to kind of create some displays and, I've seen a lot of people that create, knife displays with acrylic stands, but they brand it. They put the pricing out there because I feel like that's another thing. I'm sure there's some makers that could give you tips better than I can. That's what's worked for them. Um, and but nothing is more maybe frustrating than somebody walking by and possibly seeing a knife and be like, "Ooh, I really like that knife," and the price isn't there. And then there's that awkward, "Ooh, I can't afford that." So now I don't know how to get out of this situation. Um, so I think, finding a subtle way to maybe have the pricing available. Um, because again, you're in some cases now, you're either marketing to the people that stumbled across coming to a knife show, and have come in as not an active purchaser, or people that have made their big purchases, but now they have $300 left maybe to spend. So they're looking for that product that fits within those margins left that they want to spend.
Yeah, and there's 2 points that I want to make based off of what you said. One is that I think that it's fair to say with exhibitors that they can create things and go to a large show and not sell anything because what they are manufacturing is not what the buyer is looking for. And I think that that's okay to say because not every bit of the wares that somebody creates is going to be appealing to the constituents that are coming in. And
Hmm.
is that like an intrinsic failure of the maker? Not necessarily. They might be able to take every single one of those knives home and sell them somewhere there. But I think that's a confirmation bias, right? Like, so a maker says, okay, well, I'm not getting the foot traffic and I need to go somewhere else. And it's like you as a venue are not supplying me with the right environment for me to sell my knives. And then they go home and they sell all their stuff and they're like, okay, it's the venue's fault. But that's
Hmm.
not true. Like it's not true because I've always I'm very observational, and at all the shows that I've been to that Blade has put on, I have never felt like there's not been foot traffic. Like it's overwhelming how much there is. It's kind of like Brad Pitt's World War Z, where the zombies just swarm areas and just like walk through the streets. That's like goers of Blade Show. They swarm and they go to the places that they know that they're looking for, where they're going to spend the majority of their money, and then they start looking around. Or you have again like those casual buyers or lookers that maybe they're not convinced. Maybe it's their first show. Maybe they just want to get to know a maker and they're kind of on the fence about spending their hard-earned money. But going to shows and exhibiting as a standard business practice is about understanding the market and then being able to produce a product that the market wants. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot different than a lot of makers because we kind of get a little bit prima donna or stuck up because as you build up your business, you are nurturing the customers that come back all the time, that really like what you do. And if you're selling online or you're doing social media stuff, whatever, you kind of only have people that interact that are about what you're selling. But
Mm-hmm.
at a show, like that's not necessarily the case. It's like somebody's going into a large environment with a lot of variation, and there's everything to see. Like there, I don't know that, like I've even seen people try to bring like guns and stuff and sell them at Bladeshow. Like there's so many people. There's so many different people trying to sell things. There's so many people trying to market their wares that as a goer, like I think this last year at Texas, I didn't have a table, right? And I just went as a normal person. And for me, walking around, I was overwhelmed with just like how much variety of things there are for me to see. And so, like, if I put myself in a customer's position, I don't, I don't think that, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this where it makes sense.
It's like walking to a candy store. It's
Yeah,
basically there's just like you don't know that you like Skittles because there's 18 variations of chocolate and you know you like chocolate, so you never thought about even trying Skittles because you just came in there for chocolate, but now there's Jelly Bellies and all these other sweet and sour things, and you had no idea that you ever needed those or wanted to try those. So I understand what you're coming from. You're walking in, and it's just like, and I feel like to add on to what you're saying, we as an industry and as a community, we have to also watch what is trending. And you will notice that we do have some, what I would like to, I don't want to say fringe in a sense that they're not warranted or welcome, but we do have a kind of these EDC products, if you will, now where they have become synonymous with the knife industry. And we vet every single person that comes into the Blaze Show now that's brand new. You will never be able to get a contract and just sign up and come to the show without being vetted if you're new. So when someone decides they want to come to the Blade Show, I ask for pictures, I ask for websites, I ask for, social if you have it, so that I can really get an understanding of what are you selling and are you, you know, a part of the community. And there are a lot of these fringe products now that are being widely embraced and accepted by the knife community. And we do want to welcome them, even though they're not necessarily a physical knife. Um, so now you add that to the mix, i.e., in Texas when you were there, and it just adds a whole nother level now.
oh yeah. I mean, and even within the context of knives, it's like so I have a lot of knives that are focused towards hunting, right, or outdoor use.
Hmm.
And and a customer who comes up, they might say, "Okay, well, what's this knife for?" I'm like, "Well, you can hunt or skin a deer with it. I don't know, right?" And they're like, "Oh, okay." They put it back down. But if they're looking for an EDC knife, you can say, "Oh, well, I mean, you can do a lot of things with it. It's a light knife that is easy to wear on the belt, or you can put your sheath in your pocket or whatever, or you could, get a sheath for a neck knife, and you can use it for, hunting or EDC or whatever, or self-defense if you need to. And it's, it's all about like the context at which you're presenting your goods, not that this is a traditional hunting pattern or whatever, but that these are the things that you could do with it. And that paradigm shift of like marketing your product to a crowd that is looking for the everyday carry knife, right?
Hmm.
Like I can argue a pocket knife or in all its variations, or a fixed blade, are all kind of EDC knives, unless you're carrying around a machete. The most small, hand knives are EDC knives, but the general public might not always see it that way. And so it's important to understand that, like, not only is the industry kind of always shifting about what is perceived value, but you as a maker have to be able to think in that context and be able to rebrand your products in some ways, like use of products, to fit the people who are coming in and looking at your stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that again is spot on to what I'm saying is, we do everything we can to create an experience for both the exhibitors and the attendees, but there also has to be some work on your part. We can't do it all. And I think that includes being educated on what is trending, what is important, where is the marketplace shifting, etc. And are you going to follow along with that shift, and or are you going to continue to just kind of, you know, build what you're comfortable with and what you want to do, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it could, have an impact on your sales, etc.
Yeah, well, because I think if you are a one trick pony in developing products, then you're going to have a very narrow window of the things, like people are looking for that trick. Versus if you were a little bit more varied in it, in your productization and whatnot, then you have a higher likelihood of selling things or being successful in it because you're casting a little bit wider net. And I think that's one thing that's real difficult, because the the knife industry kind of trains you in being like very specific. Like some people really just love all of the loveless patterns, and so they want a knife maker that makes loveless patterns to specification. And there's others that want like EDCs that are very specific. They want, the newer materials, like carbon fibers and newer micartas and, crazy G10s and stuff like that. But then you have like all of these other micro niches, and it just kind of gets in this like nicheception where it's just like you get so siloed into a product that you're like, well, it sells here, but you've basically created this system where people are coming to you because of this thing. But if you go to a show and it's not selling, you're like, okay, well, the show sucks. And that's like, couldn't be further from the truth. Kind of with that being said, I think that there's a lot of knife makers that are not really great at marketing, and because of that, I think that that's one of the problems. That as you enter a show, you have to, as a maker, understand that a show is a way to market your knives, but there are so many facets to how you can take advantage of that. And I think that that might be lost on people, like, because context wise, it used to be that the only shows were put on by the
Hmm.
Knife Makers Guild. And in order to be at the show,
Hmm.
you had to be a guild member. And if you became a guild member, there's some people who were guild members and they automatically sold like 60% more knives. Like it made such an impact to be at that show, because the barrier of entry was that you had to be a guild member, right? But that construct doesn't exist so much anymore, because you have the internet and you have shows, and you have to make for a larger audience where you don't have this like echo chamber of traditional knives and everything inside of the that guild context. You have to be able to appeal to a lot larger um, uh, you know set of customers and an industry, and that's where I think a lot of in this like mentorship fashion of knives, where I'm learning from an older knife maker. They've done what they've done 30 years ago. How does that translate to what the industry is calling for now? And can you kind of can you figure that out? Can you like take a portion of the like, the mentorship of how to build a knife, and then turn that into being able to navigate the current economic and environmental market? And that's kind of where I think that Bladeshow has it right. Like you provide such a diverse but specific to knives and the industry environment for people to be able to put themselves into in order to figure out like how can I do this thing and how can I appeal to it. Like that's you provide like the test bed for that, and that's what I think I've always appreciated about the way that you guys run shows and the people that you accept in and whatnot. Is it's yes, it's a drinking from a fire hose, but there's no better environment to quickly receive feedback on what's working and what's not.
Yeah, and I think that's another nail, if you will, that you just hit on, is this community is so giving in terms of, I'm sure if you turned around and asked Steve Johnson for his advice on, hey, what could I do different on my knives, or, share some of your tips that you've learned over the years. Steve Johnson would not look at you and say, absolutely not. He would automatically give you feedback whether you liked hearing what he had to say. that that's different, but I've talked to so many people that have said that's been another advantage of shows where they've been able to take their knives up to the best in the industry, and in some cases the world, and put that knife in front of them and ask them to pick it apart. um, and what an amazing opportunity. I don't know that I can assure you that, Apple doesn't go to Samsung and ask them what they're doing right, and vice versa. And I think that the show also creates that opportunity and that experience for newer makers to really, you're up, and in some cases, maybe standing next to someone that you've looked up to, that you chose to emulate. Or, I even take Bill Ruppel as a great example, a Hall of Famer with Blade Magazine, but an amazing group of slip joint makers that he's cultivated over the years, and the knowledge that he's shared, and, watched all those guys come up the ranks and now become outstanding makers, and how they've all chose to continue to share that. And I think that's really another thing that's kind of amazing about our community. And you see that happen at the shows. And really, what spurred us to create Blade University is we have an opportunity where we have exposure to the best of the best in the business. And, what better place to sit down and learn from the best of the best from a very fractional cost. Um, but to sit in a room while these people are willing to share their expertise, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, that's a I've been interested in what you guys have been doing with Blade University because as an outsider, like when I'm not doing show circuits, right? I've always kind of felt like, well, I really would like to be at that show, right? For instance, like Laren Thomas was at your Atlanta Blade University, and I'm like, oh
Hmm.
man, like of all the people, like I had just talked to him on the podcast. He was talking about like preparing for his demonstration and everything, and uh, to go to the show and be able to sit in on that would have been a really great experience. But as somebody who can't go to the show, I don't have that experience. Has it
Hmm.
I get that the idea should be that you're cultivating a desire for people to go to the show, right? Have you guys ever thought about taking things like Blade University and being able to offer it after the fact to people who couldn't go to the show for like a not maybe like a paid subscription or like record them or things like that and have like some production associated with it so the people who can't go can still be a part of it or see like or get the information from it.
Sure. Yeah, we get asked that question a lot. And it's not, I do want to stress, it's not because we're trying to force everyone to come to the show. And if you don't come to the show, then, tough on you. You should have come to if you wanted to see Larry Thomas. Um, it's more, honestly, it's more about the bandwidth of people, personnel, et cetera. Kind of go back to, I don't necessarily have a team. So now you're talking about, you know, needing to outsource people, equipment, everything else who's full-time um, responsibility at the show would be just that. And the other problem is because we have a lot of classes that run concurrently, now you're talking about multiple people needed because, and create multiple equipment pieces that would be needed because everything doesn't just run one off. We may have classes, multiple classes going on. So it's more that the footprint doesn't necessarily lend itself easily to reproducing that content like that. So it's not us being selfish that we're forcing people to the show to only get that content. It's more about the bandwidth and the resources that would be needed to execute on that.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine the overhead. I mean, because I would say that by and large, if we look at the table cost for most other shows out there and Blade Show, the table costs are higher, right? But
Well, I do want to interject here quickly. Believe it or not, now I don't want to, I'm not trying to compare Blade Show to a local show, in, let's just say Texas. Um, and I'm not taking away from any knife shows that are out there because any knife show, the more knife shows, you know, the more vibrant the community, that's great. So yeah, if you take a local knife show that's in a ballroom, inside a hotel, or at the fairgrounds, yeah, your table cost might be 150, but you're also, to your point, the foot traffic is also not there. So, that having been said, though, if you take the cost of a table at the Blade Show and you pit it up against some of the other bigger, more well-known shows, our table and booth costs are actually cheaper than most of those other shows, believe it or not.
oh yeah,
And
no,
part of that is because we, we realize that, custom knife makers and everything like that. I mean, we all know the joke in the industry. If you want to make $1 million as a knife maker, you start out with $2 million. I mean, so that having been said, our goal is not to stick it to people when it comes to table costs. We could easily make Blade Show table cost $1,000. And for most people, they wouldn't blink an eye because they're like, well, yeah, that makes sense because of the amount of the people that they drive in the doors. We can justify that cost. But that's really not what we're trying to do. Yes, we're all in the business of making money, but we also respect that the custom knife maker is not making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, we pride ourselves on doing various things where, we try not to raise the prices very much. We do have to raise them some because just like everything else, post 2020, all of our costs are going up. So people don't realize the significant amount of money. that it takes to execute these shows. So, but we try to do fair things where we say, hey, if you know you're coming back next year, just renew your table now, and you basically are going to pay the same table cost, or the same booth cost. But if you were to kind of put yourself out there and look at some of the other shows and get their space contracts, you'd be surprised that Blade Show, for its size, and I want to stress, I'm not talking about a more local show that happens with maybe only 100 exhibitors total at the show. We're still one of the more cost-effective events to participate.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the point is, like in the as a knife maker, like perception is kind of the name of the game. Like a knife maker looks at these things and like, oh, the cost of all this thing is like this stuff is going up, right? Or like it's like this is an extraordinary cost as compared to this, right? But like in the context of exhibitions or conferences, like a blade shows table fees are exceptionally low. Like I mean, it is nothing for a like a technology company to spend between $25,000 and $5,000 on a table or booth, and not
Hmm.
actually receive any sales from that thing, right? It's all a networking opportunity to them. So
Right,
outside of the context of knives, when you're in a venue and you're going to see customers, you're using your marketing budget to go out there and reach to the people who are in the specific avenue that you're trying to target. And so like there's not so many industries that have conferences or exhibits where you're actively selling the wares. You're basically trying to
right.
front load customers that will then come back and check you out. And that's a lot different. But what I mean is that it's difficult with the prices that Blade Show offers to us as exhibitors to assume that we're going to have a lot of extra bells and whistles, like Blade University being televised or live events or things like that to allow other people who can't come to the show to experience that, because we could be talking about if there's no revenue that's generated for the personnel that's required, it could be like, I mean, you you're kind of put between a rock and a hard place. Like, how are you going to charge like $1,000 extra or $1,000 for a table just to be able to provide the staffing that's required to do X, Y, Z? So you as a organizer have to always think about the overhead, and I think that that's something that knife makers in the industry has to think about, is because your job is to like really provide the best venue for those exhibitors to market, network, and sell their wares. And all of these extra things, although they might be really great ideas, but if the overhead's too high, then you'd have to increase prices. And how are you going to do that in a industry where you really are trying to take into account the knife maker or the exhibitor and how you price them out potentially of the show. So I appreciate that consideration, because it seems like you guys are fair and balanced about the way that you're trying to conduct this, which I think is for your size, for everything that Blade does for the knife maker. It is really refreshing to think about how much you think about everyone that's involved in your processes in order to try to like even things out and make it fair and equitable for everybody.
Yeah, and like I said, I think some of that just comes with doing this for 15 years, and just having not only, I understand at the end of the day that, we're running a business, and so always straddling that line of, hey, we are running a business, but we understand too that we're not, we're dealing with people that, again, don't have multis and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, especially in this industry. So, making sure that we can still appeal to everyone, but also create an experience that everyone gets excited about. And I think I keep going back to that word, and that's something that we pride ourselves on is Blade Show is not just a show where you come, set up your table, and then at the end of the day you go back to your hotel or whatever. We've worked hard and continue to strive hard and kind of trying to find our place in Texas and West and kind of recreating the Atlanta experience, which we all know and love with the pit, um, which I think is, just as synonymous with the Atlanta show now as anything else is. So trying to replicate that in our other venues and creating, right now we just at Texas and West we offer the similar classes, but we just do them as free demos right now. We really are just about, hey, let's get the people in and give them a taste of what coming to a Blade show is like, and that is the most important rather than collecting a little more extra money from them. Um, because once we kind of feel like once you've come to a Blade show and you really got a sense of the community and what it's all about, and going to a free class and sitting in a room with the Rupels, the Schwartzers, the icons of the industry, if you will, for lack of a better word, the Hall of Famers. We really want you to experience that. And then we know we've gained a customer for life that's like, man, that was awesome. And is really what strategically made us start looking at, okay, how do we take this footprint and replicate it in other areas of the country? Because not everybody comes to Atlanta. It's expensive for people coming from the West Coast. So finding, a locale that we can now bring the Blade Show experience to people that can't come to Atlanta. Um, how do we replicate that? And we've been very fortunate, and it's taken a long time, but we finally feel like we have three cities that have served us very well, and we're super stoked to be in all of them.
Yeah, I have yet to go to your Blade Show West show. I think last year I was planning on it, but when my daughter she was going through a bout of rejection, I was like, well, it's either be here and be present for family reasons, or go to a show and try to navigate that space. So I had to like nope out of it. But I what you've
Which
done,
I'm a huge fan of family first always, and I will always say
yeah.
that no matter what.
Well, yeah, yeah, and I still think that very very accommodating and understanding that I couldn't go to that show, but um, I want to talk a little bit about like the pit experience and awards and things like that, but I think it's important. I kind of want to talk about like the debacle of 2020 with pandemic and how you guys helped to navigate that experience for showgoers. So we have like late night 2019, right? There's like this bubbling about a pandemic. We start seeing very veiled insinuations that there's this virus that's going around, kind of like we did with bird flu and everything when that came around in China. And then 2020, early 2020 hits, and in the normal scheme of things, you have right after the Atlanta show in 2019. A person is supposed to get their contract in by a certain period of time so that way you guys can start working on what availability you have for new exhibitors, and then you start prepping for the next show period, right?
Hmm.
And then you have this pandemic that hits, and everyone, like, I mean, everybody was shut down. It was a total cluster across the entire world. And what I so 2020 show didn't happen obviously, but you guys were able to turn it around and manage all of these people, and then come in for, even though I would argue that there was a lot of countries and exhibitors that could not come to the show, 2021 for me, being the first show experience, was still very strong. Like there was still a lot of traffic and everything. What did you learn from that experience? Kind of like what did you guys do to absorb some of the risk associated with the show, and what did you learn from it?
Yes, that's a great question. And and I only laugh because there is no handbook. There was no handbook. There was no guide like, okay, how do we navigate a pandemic? I don't think anybody had a guide on how you navigate a pandemic. I mean, this was a learning process for not only me, but all the partners I work with, our hotel partners, our decorator, our um, facilities, everything. So we were all just trying to figure out these pieces and then from there navigate how do we not, you know, sock it to people when we're already down. So there's so many things that we had to go through um, with our partners. And as you probably may or may not have known, because again, I can't remember. So you're right, 2019 for us for Blade Show was like the best Blade Show at the time in the history of Blade shows. I mean, we were riding the wave, the high. Everybody was just stoked. Our 2020 signups were strong because again, we're just feeding off that energy, and everybody's like, "Yeah, I'm all ready for next year." And then we get to March, and like everybody else, we were following it, but we weren't too worried because, like everybody else in the world at that time, oh, it'll be 2 weeks, it'll be a month. And then April got here, and we're like, okay, that's not going to be the case. So we did a survey to all of our exhibitors, and we surveyed everybody, and we decided to move the show to August at that time because again, we were all still uncertain. But we gave everybody options. We said you can stay on board for August. However, if you choose not to, we're not going to penalize anybody for choosing not to. We'll roll your funds over, et cetera, et cetera. So, like everybody else, we were just trying to kind of figure out, and so we had to get on board with our hotel partners. We had to make sure our decorator, we had to make sure the facility. But then let's be real, there came a time and I think it was probably at that point June where and it could have been even more the end of June where we're like it was 6 weeks out and I literally said to, our business owners, we have to make a decision right now because people have to have time to prepare and we have to react. And, we made the difficult decision to pull the show, as we all know now was the right decision because there's no way we could have done that show because nobody would have showed up. It would have been an awful expense from everybody. So that was new, navigating all that, transferring everybody's money, reassuring everybody, spaces will be held, your money will still be there. You had the option to get your money back if you didn't, you know, want to take the risk that 21 was going to be better. Um, and then fast forward 2021, we had the opportunity, as some people know, to take over what at the time was the ICCE show. We just created a little show, and people were stoked because it was the first opportunity. The community, like I said, I can't stress this community enough. They love being with each other, and people were missing knife shows. They were missing with being with their peers. We, of course, Texas was all about no masks. So we knew that it was going to be a good venue to a small venue. We took that show over and we kept it ICCE just so there was an awareness. And we had a line out the door on opening morning. People were just excited to be back. They had money burning in their pocket. And that gave us the confidence to keep moving forward with Blade Atlanta, knowing that it wouldn't be a Blade Atlanta that like 2019, but we saw the response for Texas, so we knew let's do this. The people will show up. Same experience. People were just excited to be with the community again. People had money to burn, they had money to spend. Um, and so that's why the 2021 show was able to take place and still was a good show for a lot of people. And we were somebody willing to take the risk. And it was a risk. I mean, because we knew if we were still going to have to wear masks, that was not going to work with our community. Like that was just not going to happen. But we were willing to take the risk and go there, and it paid off. Maybe not necessarily financially, but it paid off because we said the community is here, they're thirsty, they want to be back together, and the people will show up. And we did that. Um, and believe it or not, for as much um, negativity that COVID brought into this world, the one advantage for us as Blade Show is it opened up venues that we had long looked at getting a show at. Those doors opened because events either went away, they weren't willing to take that risk. They found other ways to do shows virtual, whatever that case may be. And those venues that we had been hoping to get into for years, i.e., Texas, and now our home of Blade Show West Salt Lake City, those doors opened. And finally, like I alluded to earlier, gave us a home for now what will be Blade Show Texas for years to come and Blade Show Yes West for years to come.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty incredible in the context of what you guys do and the teams that you have that you're able to navigate that. And like I don't really care too much about what individual knife makers think about the way that it was handled. I don't think that there was any better way to handle it because there was no way, right? They like again, there was no instruction manual. Like the reality is for a lot of people in the context of the pandemic and whatnot, they shuttered their doors and they have not recovered.
Yes,
And you guys like collectively have been able to turn that situation into an environment where now not only do we have Atlanta, but we have Texas and West, and so we have three Blade experiences a year. That's incredible to me. Um, I'm interested to know because you have to answer to ownership and everything. How did you feel with Henry Wu, like, and the support and everything? Like, I assume that like he took a risk as a business owner in being able to allow you guys to navigate this space and feel comfortable with making the right decisions. Like, was that an easy process in trying to balance everything out? Was there any situation that you guys were considering the risk not being worth it?
absolutely. I mean, and Henry's been with us now since 2018, and like everything, when you have new ownership, we all kind of had um, our own challenges that we navigated, and um, I, there's there's nothing that I can't say that has not been more better than Henry coming in and he and I work so well together now in terms of collaborating on these events, and his passion for this industry has grown significantly. But he and I, obviously in 2020, there was a lot of back and forth because he's stepping back from a business standpoint, justifiably so, of kind of, okay, we pull these shows, you know, that's going to be a huge financial hit to our company, and what's going to happen as a result of that. And then me also looking at it from a personal standpoint of, we can't put these people at risk either. So navigating all that again, no manual to help us do that. But in 2021, believe it or not, in everything that I do before I sometimes make decisions, because I have been here for 15 years, I have some amazing relationships with so many people. I picked up the phone. I picked up the phone for days and I called people before the Texas event that we did. And I said, guys, this is what we're thinking about doing. would you come? And overwhelmingly was 100% hell yeah, we're there. Um, and so, I went back to Henry and I said, okay, I think we do this. And of course, going back now to his business hat, if you will, he's like, okay, yeah, then let's go because we got to make up for, 2020. So, you know, me having those relationships and just being able to pick up the phone and call all those guys, um, was huge. And that is really what was kind of the catalyst for us saying, all right, let's do this. People are ready. They trust us. They're ready to be back together. And the country's opening back up, and let's go. And that really is how kind of Texas 2021 started, is me calling a lot of these people and then kind of assuring Henry, like, we've got this, we can do this. And then him being 100% on board and supporting it.
That is really exciting stuff to me. Like anytime I personally see where there's a moment where you can like everybody can rise to the challenge or they can fail out. I always look at that situation and if depending on what the behavior is, depends on whether I'm disappointed or I'm really really proud, right? And I'm really proud of you guys because I think like you and Henry and your entire team made a decision that could have broken the system by which we as knife makers are able to exhibit with shows and whatnot, right? And you thought about the spirit of what it is that you guys are trying to do. And if it was 100% a business decision, then I I don't know how easily any of us would have recovered if shows were the things that we were relying on for our bread and butter, right? Like I think I put myself in Henry's situation. So 2018, he makes this humongous investment
Hmm.
in going into this avenue. A pandemic hits, and then he's like, "All right, like I have a decision I have to make. Do I continue to float this thing, this idea, and or do I try to mitigate risk?" And with your advocacy and reaching into the industry and collaborating with other makers and other people that in your Rolodex that you trust, you guys were able to come up with a plan that weathered the storm. There was a community of makers and exhibitors that supported you in that decision, and now we have way more than we did pre-pandemic. Right? You guys took a risk, and you trusted the process, and you loved what you were doing, and then it turns into this thing where now like we have more of what we had before. It's like it's not that it was like bust and we'll never recover. It's that now you guys are like hitting on cylinders with three shows and doing the same thing across the United States and providing more opportunities and bringing that experience to Texas and to West and Salt Lake. To me, that's incredible. Like, how many opportunities do you get to witness people caring so much about something that you guys can work through it, and then because of that you get like blessings and success in return. Like that's really cool to me.
Well, and something, something that I, for lack of a better word, pride myself on. um, I try not to be a prideful human being, but it is acknowledging that the Blaze show, it isn't about me. People are not coming to Blaze show at the end of the day to see me. I mean, the exhibitors are happy to see me, but at the end of the day, who we're creating these experiences for are for you guys and your customers and creating the experience that they can all come and love. And so, um, you know, I have cultivated these amazing relationships where I value so much the input of makers and not only makers, but even some of the factory production guys. And when I'm thinking about introducing something or doing something that would have a major impact. I'm not talking about like I call guys and ask them what we should charge for tickets, but doing something that might change the overall engagement of the show or how we handle something that would be a major change. Because one thing I've learned in this industry, a lot of guys don't like change. Um, I call people and I get their feedback and I ask them and I say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Give me your feedback. I want to hear the pros and cons if we do this. Um, because at the end of the day, if it's something that's widely received as negative or cons, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to jeopardize what we have created. Um, but it's nice that I have that opportunity to do that and so value so many people in this industry and their opinion and look at the Blade Show as theirs. It's not just about us running it as a business. The Blade Show is you guys all as the exhibitors as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I everybody should know, like, be kind to Alicia. Like, like really, and I mean that because like even within the context of this interview, I I'm intrinsically invested in trying to protect your spirit. Like the thing that you bring, everybody should just be like, we have to protect Alicia. We have to protect this thing. You're our biggest advocate, right? Like without you helming this thing that people think about event planners and they're like, oh, whatever, but they don't realize how much goes into it. Like you're thinking on so many different planes that to just do stuff adequately is hard enough, but then to think in a way where you can make the most out of the experience takes a really unique person, and that's what I see in you. It's going into like the this awards experience in the pit, right? So contextualizing this for
Hmm.
people who have not gone to Blade Show yet. There's the show, and then there's the after show, right? There's the show and the exhibit, and then there's the pit. So the pit exists in the what's the hotel again? I forget it's not the
In Atlanta, it's the Renaissance Waverly Hotel.
yeah. So yeah. So the Renaissance Waverly Hotel is this humongous hotel that all the rooms are on the outside, and there's this humongous atrium, like just all the way up to the ceiling. And in the pit, at the first floor, there's a bar and food, but then there's this conglomeration of exhibitors and customers and collectors and purveyors and Blade Show that they all mingle together, and this is really kind of the heart of networking. Like it's just as much as the show is a piece for
Hmm.
networking. When you go to the pit, you kind of like slough off the show regalia and everything, and you get down to talking to people over a scotch or over some appetizers because they haven't eaten all day, or after the sheer exhaustion. It's like everybody gets to let their hair down, and that environment is so conducive towards making friends and building lasting relationships. Like to me, the show is amazing, but then to go and have this experience in the pit where we can say, "Oh, we got through the day. We dealt with the customer onslaught and standing on our feet all day and talking to people. And I might be hoarse, but I'm still going to try to meet this person." And when it comes to like that, I don't know how you replicate that, but it's an amazing component of the show experience, right? When it comes to awards, that's like an incredible experience as well because Blade Show awards have now now come come to have been known or be known as like the who's who. It's like receiving a Grammy or an Oscar in knives. How do you navigate the process for making sure that the award process and everything like that goes smoothly? Like, is there like it seems like a lot of orchestration after you're already actively doing all this actual show stuff.
So I can, I, here's how I can speak on the awards, because believe it or not, that is something that originally was created from a magazine standpoint. So actually, all the awards at the show are kind of created, uh, spawned from the Blade magazine. And then what we have been trying to do, though, over the years is, like you said, make it almost Oscar Grammy worthy. Like, this is something you really aspire to. So one thing I want to do more than anything is clear up some misconceptions out there that, awards are, we hear it all. Awards are, they won the award because they spend sponsorship dollars. They won the award. How come so and so didn't win the award? He has a much better knife. The awards are chosen strictly by the people that choose to bring them in and be, voted on. So when someone says, well, so and so is a much better knife maker, no one's going to discount that. However, if so and so didn't bring his knife into the judging room at the designated time to be part of the judging process, then that person's not going to win. So we do our best, at every show we send out, what the categories are in advance. And what we've done over the last 2 years is also try to streamline it. So Atlanta is kind of the benchmark where it has every single award that we do. Those all happen at Atlanta. And then what we've done is streamline them a little bit in Texas and West, because you're talking about, almost 1,000 exhibitors in Atlanta, but then, only 300 exhibitors maybe in Texas, and 250 at West. You're not going to have all those categories. And there's something to be said about, well, you basically won the award because nobody else entered. We don't want that, because that takes away from the cachet of winning that award. So there may be 15 custom categories in Atlanta, but we only have 6 custom categories in Texas, because we take an inventory of all the exhibitors and try to get the best representation of what types of knives those makers all make. Um, so again, I do want to clear up the misconception that the winners are solely voted on based on who brings their actual knives into the judging room to be judged. And then we, in both cases for factory and custom, we have a panel of neutral judges, which is another misconception that we like to clear up. Everybody has an opinion on how they think we do it. Um, and those judges that have the criteria, and then usually, um, somebody like a Steve Shackleford, who's more than experience, could serve as a tiebreaker in the room. Um, but that is basically how the awards process is done, and we have continued to evolve it. And like we said, we're trying to make that program a program that people aspire to win the Blade Show award. But I can't stress enough that the winners are chosen based on who brings their knives or their product to the voting area.
Yeah,
And I think that's big to stress that.
yeah. What is that? The Wayne Gretzky quote is, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take."
Right. So we don't have, especially in Atlanta, there's no way we could have judges walking up and down every single table of 700 tables and choose the winners. I mean, that cannot be done. So However, this year, because I will say I went above and beyond, the PA system in Atlanta is more than lackluster in the exhibit hall. It basically sounds like the teacher, in the old Snoopy shows, where it's just a voice and you can't understand it. So I took a bullhorn and went up and down every single aisle on Friday and reminded people to take their knives to the judging rooms because the judging was beginning. So, everybody knew, hey, listen, if you want your knife and you want it to be entered, you need to get it in there. Um, so, like anything else, that's just going to continue to take time um, and for people to understand that, hey, yeah, we do put effort into this. It's not just, a couple of us. I don't have anything to do with the voting. So I just make sure that it's facilitated and everybody's educated and all the exhibitors know where to go and where to be and what the categories are going to be and what the judging criteria is and all that.
Yeah. Well, and part of the cachet that you're talking about is like, so, you submit your knives and you get them inspected and judged on, and then assuming that you you win, right? You get a physical award, you get recognized on social media, but then also you get your knife photographed by Coop, right?
It depends on which show, actually, because we do have a couple different photographers. And then, yes, you get it photographed, but then it's also in Blade Magazine, in the next issue of the Blade Magazine.
Yeah.
So all the winners are always featured in the next Blade Magazine. And then, like you said, they're featured on our social, and then they're featured on Blade Magazine's social, and then they're featured on blademag.com as well. So there's, there's a lot of visibility for a maker that goes just beyond us handing them a nice little, trophy at the show.
Well, yeah, because observationally, there is a lot of buzz that gets developed because of awards, right? And it's usually like
Hmm.
everybody waits to hear right after the award ceremony who got what and when, right? And it's not only people who follow Blade Show, but then the individual makers are like posting up stuff and saying, "Oh, I'm like incredibly honored." It's always like a thing where everybody's taken aback by them actually winning the award when they do, right? It's kind of like when you watch the Oscars and actors come up and they're like crying, and or Miss America where they're like there's a loss of words, and you have to like play music to get them off the stage when they accept it. it's it, it's kind of like that, but there's a lot of customer buzz. There's a lot of like industry buzz from awards, and to me that's really great because like if there's like if there's something that knife makers can look at that builds attention and excitement. Your awards process and the ceremony and everything like that, like the exposure, is a humongous deal. Like that's something that can really bring a lot of exposure to a maker if they will put the effort into bringing their A game to these shows and their work, right? And to me, looking at it on the periphery at the time that I wasn't doing shows, and then also seeing what it's like to be in the room while all this stuff is going on, the experience is really cool. It's just so much more than going to a show and putting your stuff out and trying to sell knives. It's this entire experience and being able to I guess just be a fly in the wall of like just the conglomeration of so much success and so much artistry and so much creativity and so much heart and soul that goes into this knife engine. And so to me, you know, shows shows that are put on by Bladeshow are just exceptional, and I don't think that you ever, if people are just looking at the context of Bladeshow within the context of local shows or gun shows or things like that, they'll never really be able to appreciate just how much more you guys are trying to focus on making the experience exceptional.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I can't go back. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't stress enough again, like experience, and you just said it too. That's ultimately at the end of the day, I think is what does set us apart from other knife shows. And there's a lot of successful knife shows in our industry, and they each fill their need, they each fill their niche, they each serve their purpose, and again, they all just make knives stay relevant as a whole, as this industry and this community. And I think all of them bring value. But where we maybe excel is some of the other things that we bring to the table to make it more than just a show. You come for a weekend. People take days off to come to Blade Show. Like they take vacation days. I get more emails asking when are tickets going on sale than any other email sometimes. And that's exciting. People want to know because they've got a plan and they want to know when they can book their hotel and that's exciting. And when you're looking at people, coming for the weekend, they're coming because for them that's their little mini getaway and they're going to have a reunion and they're going to meet all their boys or women. Don't want to discount any of the amazing women in this industry. Um, it's a weekend that they look forward to. And I've seen knife makers that no longer exhibit at our shows for various reasons, which I love and accept. But daggone it, if they still don't come to one blade show, just because they still want to be there and they still want to be a part of it and they still want to be with the community, but for whatever reason, they just don't have that bandwidth to create enough product at this point in their lives right now to kind of man a table or man a booth for the weekend, but they still want to be there.
Yeah. Well, and kind of touching on the point of like a women in knives, there's there has traditionally been a focus in knives towards a man's market,
Hmm.
right? Like all the old guild shows, everything like that, gun shows, it all is like centered towards well the a it's a male driven industry, right? But one thing that I think is very interesting about what you guys cultivate is the that you provide an environment where women in knives and women in this craft are also have an equal playing field to be able to exhibit their work. And it doesn't, no longer do we exist in an age where the only women in knives are the wives that watch tables and support the knife maker. Like, there's some
Absolutely.
incredible knife makers and craftsmen,
Hmm.
like Grace Horn, for
Yes.
instance. I mean, she makes incredible scissors, and she makes it a point to come to blade events. And to me, that's exciting because since our son passed, we have a house full of daughters, and I think a lot about I do knives, but what does that look like for my daughters? Like, what do they say? Oh, I could be a knife maker like dad. And back in the day, it's like, no, just go and do something else because like when you like knives are a guy's thing. But my youngest daughter, even our 18-year-old, she they've all talked about making knives. They've all talked about we've taken our second oldest daughter to several blade shows. I take our youngest one to Texas because it's local,
Hmm.
and they are all excited about knives because they see faces inside of the crowd that represent them.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
you know, yeah, I mean it's an incredible thing. Like, and I love that. I mean, I love the inclusiveness that you guys provide in just being able to provide a darn good show and then allowing everybody to be impressed by just the diversity, the diversity of products, of people, of the sexes, right? And being able to use that as a reference point, that where then it's normalized for them. They see incredible knife makers and artisans and everything. And if anybody thought that like event planning was just like this thing that happens, they can look at you as an example and just be spurred on to be the best at trying to cultivate their own thing in the context of what of coordination and customer service and advocacy and networking. Like, you are a role model for like my daughters. And that to me is just incredible, to be able to be a part of a knife community where I have so many great role models for my daughters to look at. I could reference you as a case in point to that.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much. That warms my heart. And I think you're right. I think another thing that, 2 years ago we did actually an all women's panel as part of Blade University, really celebrating women in knife making. And then even in Texas last year, we worked with Bradford Knives, and they, have created a kid-friendly knife. And, just really stressing those things when we promote our shows, kind of giving a little extra attention to detail. To your point, like, this is a family event. Bring the kids. Like, there's, you're right. The women in this industry are not just the women supporting their husbands, which I do want to stress and put a lot of value on, because as we all know, behind every good man is a good woman. But we do want to celebrate that. And I think the aspirational thing that you said, I mean, I can't think of, I know there's tons of father and daughter teams. Obviously, Jason Knight and Tiger Lily Knight is just an amazing example of, you know, someone that has learned from such a nurturing father, but then has created her own identity and her own brand and her own knives. And, watching that relationship grow is amazing. And so I think you're right. If your daughter decides she wants to follow in her footsteps and learn to make knives, I think that's awesome. And that's a culture that we want to cultivate for everybody. And, I have some 16, 17, and 18-year-old knife makers that have come to me and want to be an exhibitor. And I mean, like, how cool is that? You know, like an 18-year-old that asked me if it's okay, can he set up and have his own table? I'm like, absolutely, you can have your own table. And that's really cool. And then you look at Carrie Fisher, that just uh, was a 19-year-old that just got her ABS Mastersmith 2 weekends ago. So, Josh Smith was the other one that was the youngest as a 19-year-old. But, Kara's following in her father's footsteps, and now she's a 19-year-old ABS Mastersmith. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, and talking about like niches inside of the Blade Show environment, like we have ballad songs,
Yes.
right? I mean, for better or for worse, I had Lucas Cow on like quite a while ago, but
Oh,
we
great
talked about
guy.
Squid Industries. Yeah, I mean, not only was he managing the booth, but every single parent and child who was interested in ballad songs, they treated with so much care.
Hmm.
I felt like, as a customer, because our 7-year-old at the time was like, I want to do this. They saw Piper Robertson,
Yes.
Tim Robertson's wife, right? Her sons were flipping their Squid Industry ballad songs, like the practice ones, and and my daughter looked at that and said, "Oh, hey, can we go over and look at that?" So then we went over to Squid Industries, and I bought ballad songs for my daughters, and then they were all flipping and everything. And yeah, like it's incredible that that's an inviting way for children. But then like going back and talking about women in the knife industry, like Piper Robertson sits in a row with the slip joint cartel, and everybody knows them Texas boys, especially the slip joint cartel, are a rough crowd of rowdy cowboys and Texans, and she's been able to carve out a niche for herself within leather working.
Hmm.
That to me it takes a lot of fortitude, because she's had to like navigate how to figure out not only being an artisan within leather, but then also being able to pick up on the industry and make just not only is her leather work just like incredibly beautiful,
Hmm.
but all of her slip sheets and everything are just beyond beautiful. Like, I mean, all the different materials she uses, and she goes to Bladeshow and she looks for suppliers for leather and things like that that help her to create these things. You know, she is constantly cultivating these relationships and this idea of creativity within leather work that applies to all of us in knives. And to me, like if you think about like how Blade creates an environment where everybody just can thrive. To me, that really
Yes,
starts. Yeah.
no, and I'm sorry, I mean, you hit it spot on. And the minute you said that too, I think about, I personally like to go to other shows sometimes, not from a standpoint of I'm like, ooh, what are they doing that we could do? But it gives me a chance to see a lot of our exhibitors that I never get time to spend time talking to because I'm so busy at my own shows. I love supporting other events, but then also getting that time. And same thing, I was at a show a while back and got the opportunity to introduce Piper and Sarah from Soulbound Leather, who have now become basically best friends. And to your point, have shared a lot of knowledge between themselves. And, another great example of just a powerhouse woman in the industry, also in her leather making. And it's been fun to watch Piper and Sarah and that relationship grow because, I've introduced them. Um, and same thing, you do that, you have a knife maker, or maybe it's a fixed blade maker, and they need someone that makes sheaths. So you get this blade show experience where, hey, so and so, have you actually met so and so that makes these awesome sheaths? You two should collaborate. And then again, to your point, it just creates that networking and business opportunity that you're not going to get on email groups or social media or things like that all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sarah's work is pretty amazing, and I like. She's really great about social media too.
Yes.
And so like I see where she's like collaborating and doing she's for Jason Knight and the knife maker celebrities, and she's in her own right doing her own thing
Hmm.
within the context of knives. She's been able to really make an incredible business for herself, and embrace that culture. And I mean, to me, uh, there's just so much. Like, I mean, I can take individual facets of the things that happen at Bladeshow and really kind of like I just marvel. Like, and but like kind of like to that point, you have really great people. I say really great people as in you and Henry and Shackleford and all of the people that touch every aspect of this show, that just exude passion. It's like the getting my badge when I like it's an exciting time. Like you go up the day before when badges open up and you start like going through the kiosk process, and I've never had a single issue. They've always either found my badge or printed it up for me. And everyone that you have working the badge stand itself are just incredibly helpful too. They're just like lovely people to help work through the process of getting things done. And to me, it's great people at Blade Show help great artisans become greater. And to me, it's something that you guys should be incredibly proud of. I'm just proud of like to be a part of it. It's as an exhibitor, sitting on the periphery, being able to talk to you about these things. To me, that's just it screams like woo. Like it's just like it makes me excited about like what happens in knives.
Yeah, I can't, like I said, I can't stress enough. I mean, I'm overwhelmingly blessed to do what I do, and I can't even imagine not doing this now. Don't get me wrong. There's days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I will tell you, 2020 was rough. I got beat up pretty bad, and I think it goes back to what you were saying, and again, that was more from the attendees and the exhibitors of people not understanding there are humans behind all this. These are, I don't, these aren't robots. These are, no names that are over in a foreign country sitting behind a computer. Those are they're human beings that care so much, and the attendee is not going to know that, and that's okay. But 2020 was definitely the roughest year, I mean, the history of doing these events because people were just angry in general. They're angry at the world, and they were just taking it out on anybody they could. But that having been said, you know, I get to do what I love, but you're also, when you strip it back to its core, you're working with people that love what they do. If you're a knife maker, you're getting to do something you love and that you're passionate about. And so when passionate people work with passionate people, it makes it a lot more exciting. And then, like you said, the build up, and then you get to the Blade Show, and everybody's just so stoked to be there because they're excited to see their friends. It's a reunion. They're excited for a fun weekend. They know it's going to be a fun weekend. They know it's going to be a fun experience. And if you can come into it with that attitude, yeah, you ultimately definitely want to still sell your product. That's also the reason you're there. But if you can look at all those other things like, hey, I get to spend the weekend around. I mean, at this point, probably some of my closest friends literally in my life that I could call at a moment's notice are from this industry at this point. And that's been built off years and years and years now. That, I call separate from, you know, the Blade Show. So,
Yeah. I kind of one of my last points I want to hit on is social media.
mhm.
It's refreshing. In my first experience with Blade Show and a big show, a buddy of mine from Texas couldn't make it to his table, and so it was an empty table for 2021. And we ended up putting candy on his table and refreshments. I probably spent more on candy than I made on knives for that show. But Steve Johnston and his wife were like, they're sitting at their tables and they didn't really have the ability to go get snacks and stuff, so they were just like munching on candy. It was a great experience. But then so many people came by just to get like candy, and we had snacks for kids like a goldfish and like a gummy packs and stuff like that. And I posted up on my social that it was primarily on Instagram that we had this table and everything, and then you guys reposted that, and just like it was constant. I had to buy pounds and pounds and pounds of candy and food. We went to I think it was Sam's Club and just bought like a bunch. I probably spent like $300 or $400 on stuff. But to me, like the experience of being shared by y'all and your team, like who primarily runs your social media? Do you have a team that runs that, or do you help to curate that, or like who's kind of like the people behind that orchestration?
It is a team. I do have a social media person, but I also actively, I also actively roam our social. And the reason why I do that goes back to relational for anything else. I can't stress enough. People are not coming to the Blade Show to see me. They're coming to the Blade Show to see you guys. They're coming to see your products. So if you guys are taking the time to tag us, with your knives and your products and what you're bringing to the show, that ultimately is what is driving the people in the door. So they're coming to buy knives. They're coming to see you guys. And so I can't stress enough, and which is why we create, the social media banners and encourage people constantly, to tag us and reach out to our exhibitors on social media. Let us know what you're bringing because we will repost it to our story. You know, now if someone posts every work in progress of their, knife, we may not post all of those because seeing a knife in its infancy, not necessarily always the most glamorous picture, but um, it makes a difference all the way around. So it's just as important for us to promote your stuff. Plus, then it's a win-win, if you will, because you're tagging us and then we're retagging you. So again, it's a mutually beneficial thing. But that's what Blade Magazine and Blade Show was created for, is the knife industry, and we want to support and build up the knife industry. And the only way we're going to do that is to share the content that you guys are creating, because that's at the end of the day, that's what they're coming to see. They don't care that Alicia's going to be there. They care what Aaron's bringing and what his inventory is going to look like on his table.
Yeah, I get that. Well, I mean, you guys do an incredible job, like front end to back end. It's just being able to talk to you about it is even more cool because it's again, there's so much conjecture. There's so much between the
Hmm.
rumor mills and everything that happen in knives that it's great to hear things from the horse's mouth, as it were. And I have always really appreciated blade shows. Like sometimes it's an investment for me because the table cost is not so much, but it's like the hotels or
Yes,
Airbnbs. It's like all
yes,
that. So probably for me personally in my locale, it probably costs about $3,500 to $4,000 all in to be able to facilitate a show, and that's with table and hotel and everything like that.
sure.
But the experiences that I've developed going to your show or shows, I should say, because Blade Show Texas is like right around the corner from me. It to me, it makes it worth it. To me, I'm paying just as much for the experience that I get out of it as being able to go and sell knives and market and everything. So you guys are rocking it, and I really do appreciate everything that you do. And I hope that our listeners on the show understand that the person behind all of this is you, and they care. You care a lot about what happens to us, what our trajectory is, and you've been able to um, network and to collaborate with so many people inside of the business structure that you have, but also the industry as a whole to try to make this better. So it's like if anybody thought that you were an unsung hero, um, they need to understand just how much you actually do. And so I will iterate it one more time. Be kind to Alicia. Like love on her, send her some chocolates, bring some gifts to Blade Show, lavish her because she is a gem in our industry, and we need to have her for all time.
Well, I appreciate that. And more than anything, obviously, just appreciate you giving me the platform to not only just talk about something clearly I love, but as always, dispel some of those rumors or some of those misconceptions that people have and don't understand, or to your point, kind of already just conjured up in their mind their own opinion. I could probably just do a podcast alone, dispelling all the rumors about Blade Show that are out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, food for thought. I definitely think that being able to have a show packet or something, or blog posts or things like that, or YouTube videos or something, whatever medium is chosen, to be able to go through all those points would be like incredibly helpful, because I didn't know any of those things. I learned it through osmosis and trial and error. And it just, it so happens that you guys are just incredibly communicative on how to do this thing and to go through the rudiments. But you're like, I definitely think that it's helpful for people who are getting into it to know, because there's a subset of knife makers who they're just like, I'm not going to do shows. Like maybe they'll go to them once in a while, but they're like, I'm not going to do it. I have the internet. I sell all my wares.
Hmm.
And I want to convey this, that when I hear that from knife makers, like I understand it, but I also get a little bit defensive is not the right word, but I hold the experience of what I get from Bladeshow very personally. I love it. I really do. And so when I hear that other people are like, nah, it's not really for me. I don't care about shows. I'm like, you don't understand. It's not a show. It's an experience. Like it is something that is just beyond the scope of what you can contain in the word show. And you have to be in it, and you have to be in it for even sometimes a little while, just to kind of understand how that thing works. But once you do, you appreciate it so much. Like anybody who's like on the fence about going to a show, I would say you can cut your teeth on local shows and everything like that, and you'll get some really great experiences. But if you want just like the ultimate experience in knife making shows, and just the engine that Alicia's helped to create and facilitate, go to a Blade show, get on the waiting list for a table. It is worth the money, it is worth the time, and you'll have an entire industry of people to help back you in how to navigate those things. So what you guys do is just incredible, and I'm a big fanboy.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And to your point, there's people where I've actually told them don't come exhibit at Blade Show yet. I literally have said come to the show first. Really take it all in, soak it all in. To your point, so that you're not out all these additional, you know, costs, and really understand it, see what people are doing, talk to people, see what works for them, what doesn't work, and then come back and exhibit at a Blade show.
Yeah, that's it's really great advice. Maybe I should have done that, but I'm used. I'm used to drinking from a fire hose. So I mean, for me, it's just like whatever. I'm like the definition of YOLO sometimes. So
That's okay. We love that too. And the only reason I say that is, is because then they don't have a great first year, and they don't see past the I didn't sell any knives, and then they don't come back and then they say the Blade show sucked. We didn't sell any knives. But that's okay. But I feel like, hey, come and see it, understand it, talk to people, and then come back and exhibit. And depending on where you are geographically now, maybe come to Texas. Maybe go do Blade Show West first. Smaller, smaller venture, smaller location, and then go to Atlanta. And I think that that also lends itself now to having more success.
yeah, no, I fully agree. I mean, it's a great environment. Whenever you guys decide to expand into Europe and do like a Blade Show London or something, I'll be first to sign up for that show.
Well, awesome.
Well, thank you, Alicia. It's an incredible pleasure. And anytime you ever need anything, just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to step in and help you. If you need to lift boxes or do something at a show, I'll be there for you. And if you need me to like bounce something off of somebody or use any of my tech skills, you like I am a tool that you could use as part of your network. So I really appreciate everything you do, and your time invested in talking with me is a humongous pleasure.
Well, thank you, and thank you again for, allowing me to talk about something I love, but also, hopefully educate people and allow people to realize just, how much love and hard work does go into this, but it's really be from somebody that just truly enjoys what they do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Good Old Blades podcast. Remember that you are loved, and God bless.